today's program is special. We will not have the usual meditation because the entire program is a kind of meditation. Also, in order to preserve the spirit of the observance, we will not have our customary conclusion. I promise you that you'll recognize the conclusion when you hear it. At that time, please stack your chairs as usual and correctly dispose of your coffee cups. And then you may leave quietly. Following today's program, if you would like to join us to continue this discussion afterwards, we will have, many of us, lunch at the Peacock Garden. I think that's its name. Okay, and we invite all of you to come and continue the discussion. Now I would like to turn the program over to David Bryan.
The presentation today is a Universal Remembrance Day, observing and honoring the veterans, all veterans, whatever their country of origin is. It's easy to judge the architects of war, the inhumanity of war, and the horror war imposes on the world. However, the energy of our judging keeps our focus out there, on them, external to us. In fact, it is the process of judging that protects us from experiencing the complexity of our own feelings. It's much more difficult to do today what we're asking of you today. We're asking you to walk inside the feelings of the soldiers who served, to feel what they felt, see what they saw, and understand what they thought. All the readings today that were selected by three of Lakeside's wordsmiths were either written by soldiers themselves, some who died in battle, or those who observed firsthand the travesty of war. They will take you inside the humanity of the soldiers who put their lives on the line. The universal language in every human being is to be seen at the point of their reality. We ask you today to see them in their reality. This morning we are honoring veterans from every country. So first, if you are a veteran who served in any military, in any country, please stand and let us acknowledge your service and sacrifice. This is your day. Please stay standing. Please stay standing. Please stand. We also want to honor those veterans who lost their lives in combat. If you lost a family member in the line of duty, please stand in their honor and remembrance. If you have a family that is currently serving in the military in any country, would you please stand? Please, all of you who have a friend or a loved one who served in war, would you also please stand? War has touched us all. You may be seated. So please, hold these people in your memory throughout the program today. Many veterans have been wounded in body, mind, and spirit. Some have had their souls stripped of dignity. Others became heroes. To honor them today, with the help of Norman Province and three of the better-known poets here at Lakeside, James Tipton, Margaret Van Every, and Mark Sconce, have selected readings that have touched people's lives across the globe and across the centuries. They allow us to feel inside the personal experiences of these soldiers. Please, let the feelings they arouse transform you and help you find your own way to honor the veterans whose characters have been forever altered by the ravages of war. Hopefully, these readings evoke the images that will draw us all into that place of silence that moves the world.
In Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Grass by Carl Sandburg, 1918. Pile the bodies high at Austerlitz and Waterloo, shovel them under, and let me work. I am the grass. I cover all. And pile them high at Gettysburg, and pile them high at Ypres and Verdun, shovel them under, and let me work. 2 years, 10 years, and passengers asked the conductor, what place is this? Where are we now? I am the grass. Let me work. Throughout human history, political leaders have encouraged the idea that it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. The Roman version, popular for 2,000 years, is in Latin, dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori. Dulce, sweet and fitting, dulce et decorum est, it is, pro patria, for the fatherland, mori, to die. Wilfred Owen, a young British poet fighting in World War I, wrote this poem, dulce et decorum est. Owen was sent back to England with an injury and returned to the trenches, and he actually died 1 week to the hour before armistice was signed, died in the trenches, shot. Bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched to sleep, many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of tired, outstripped 5-9s that dropped behind. Gas, gas, quick boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering place, you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil's sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gurgling forth from the froth corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cut of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell then with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory, the old lie, dulce et decorum est pro patria mori.
The Charge of the Light Brigade by Alfred, Lord Tennyson. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said, into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon to the front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell. Boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian, reeled from the saber stroke, shattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of the 600. When can their glory fade, or the wild charge they made? All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made. Honor the Light Brigade, the noble 600.
Another poem by the Swedish-American poet Carl Sandburg, this one written after World War II. Grass was after World War I. This is titled Threes. I was a boy when I heard three red words 1,000 Frenchmen died in the streets for: liberty, equality, fraternity. I ask, why men die for words? I was older, men with mustaches, sideburns, lilacs, told me the high golden words are mother, home, heaven. Other older men with face decorations said God, duty, immortality. They sang these threes from deep lungs. Years ticked off their say, so on the great clocks of doom and damnation, the clocks of soup and nuts, meteors flash their say-so, and out of great Russia came three dusky syllables. Workmen took guns and went out to die for bread, peace, land. And I met a Marine of the USA, a leatherneck with a girl on his knee for a memory in ports circling the earth. And he said, tell me how to say three things that will always get me by. And I said, Give me a plate of ham and eggs. And how much? And do you love me, kid?
An Irish Airman Foresees His Death by William Butler Yeats. I know that I shall meet my fate somewhere among the clouds above. Those that I fight I do not hate, those that I guard I do not love. My country is Kiltartan Cross, my countrymen Kiltartans poor. No likely end could bring them loss or make them happier than before. Nor law nor duty bade me fight, nor public men nor cheering crowds. A lonely impulse of delight drove to this tumult in the clouds. I balanced all, brought all to mind. The years to come seemed waste of breath, a waste of breath the years behind, in balance with this life, this death. Naming of Parts by Henry Reed. Men, today we have the naming of parts. Yesterday we had daily cleaning, and tomorrow morning we shall have what to do after firing. But today we have the naming of parts.
The ponica glistens in all the neighboring gardens. And today we have naming of parts.
Now, men, this is the lower sling swivel, and this is the upper sling swivel, whose use you will see when you are giving your slings. And this is the piling swivel, which in your case you have not got.
The branches hold in the gardens their silent, eloquent gestures, which in our case we have not got.
Now, men, this is the safety catch, which is always released with an easy flick of the thumb. And please do not let me see anyone using his finger. You can do it quite easily if you have strength in your thumb.
The blossoms are fragile and motionless, never letting anyone see any of them using their finger.
And this, you can see, is the bolt. The purpose is to open the breech. As you can see, we can slide this rapidly backwards and forwards, and we call this easing the spring.
And rapidly backwards and forwards, the early bees are assaulting and fumbling the flowers. They call it easing the spring.
They call it easing the spring. It is perfectly easy if you have any strength in your thumb, like the bolt and the breech and the cocking piece and the point of balance, which in our case we do not have.
And the almond blossoms, silent in all the gardens, and the bees going backwards and forwards. For today we have naming of parts.
When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, we'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. The men will cheer, the boys will shout, the ladies they will all turn out, and we'll all be there when Johnny comes marching home. The old church bell will peal with joy, hurrah, hurrah, to welcome home our darling boy, hurrah, hurrah. The village lads and lassies say the roses they will strew the way. We'll all be there when Johnny comes marching home. Get ready for the Jubilee, hurrah, hurrah. We'll give the hero free country, hurrah, hurrah. The laurel wreath is ready now to place upon his loyal brow, and we'll all be there when Johnny comes marching home. Let love and friendship on that day, hurrah, hurrah. Their choicest pleasures then display, hurrah, hurrah. And let each one perform some part to fill with joy the warrior's heart, and we'll all be there when Johnny comes marching home.
American Civil War. The Man He Killed by Thomas Hardy, another British poet. Had he and I but met by some old ancient inn, we should have sat us down to wet right many a nipperkin. But, ranged as infantry and staring face to face, I shot at him as he at me, and killed him in his place. I shot him dead because he was my foe. Just so. My foe. Of course he was. That's clear enough. Although he thought he'd list, perhaps offhand-like, just as I was out of work, had sold his traps. No other reason why. Yes, quaint and curious war is. You shoot a fellow down, you'd treat, if met, where any bar is, or help to half a crown. Another poem by Walt Whitman, Reconciliation. My enemy is dead. A man divine as myself is dead. I look where he lies, white-faced and still. I draw near, bend down, and touch lightly with my lips the white face in the coffin. This is by an excerpt from a poem by Siegfried Sassoon, another British poet, close friend of Wilfred Owen. Titled, "The rank stench of those bodies haunts me still." I remember someone that had seen dead in a squalid, miserable ditch, heedless of toiling feet that trod him down. He was a Prussian with a decent face, young, fresh, and pleasant, so I dare to say. No doubt he loathed the war and longed for peace, and cursed our souls because we killed his friends. One night he yawned along a half-dug trench at midnight and coughed. And then the British guns began with heavy shrapnel, bursting low, and howls whistling to cut the wire with blinding din. The digging went on. Men stooped and shoveled. Someone gave a grunt and moaned and died in agony in the sludge. Then the long hiss of shells stopped. He stared into the gloom. A rocket curved, and rifles rattled angrily on the left. Down by the wood, there was noise of bombs. And then the damned English loomed in scrambling haste out of the dark and struggled through the wire. And there were shouts and curses. Someone screamed, and men began to blunder down the trench without their rifles. It was time to go. He grabbed his coat, stood up, gulping some bread, then clutched his head and fell. I found him there in the gray morning when the place was held His face was in the mud, one arm flung out, his sturdy legs bent beneath his trunk. We've been reading poems out of Europe and the United States largely. I'm going to read 3 short poems out of Asia, 3 Chinese poems written 1,000 years ago related to war. First one by Du Fu, 8th century, titled Thinking of My Brothers on a Moonlit Night. Listening to dogs, but the army drums cut off human travel. A lone goose calls out in autumn. Tonight begins the season of white dew, and the moon is just as bright as in my homeland. My brothers are spread all over the land, and there is no house where I can ask whether they are alive or dead. The letters we send always go astray, and still the fighting does not cease. Li Po, 8th century, a poem titled The Moon at the Fortified Pass. The bright moon lifts from the mountain of heaven through this infinite haze of cloud and sea. And the wind that has come 1,000 miles beats at the Jade Pass battlements. China marches its men down Po Ting Road, while enemy troops peer across the dark waters of the bay. And since not one battle in history sent all its fighters back again, the soldiers on both sides turn around and look behind them and think of home with wistful eyes, and of those tonight in the lonely beds who toss and turn and cannot rest. Final short Asian poem by Qin Dao, Lung Si Song, 9th century China. They vowed to sweep away the barbarians without regard of self. 5,000 in their furs and embroidered vests perished in the dust of battle. Alas, their bones lay beside the Wu-Ting River, but they still live in their ladies' dreams in springtime.
They, by Siegfried Sassoon. The bishop tells us, when the boys come back, they will not be the same, for they'll have fought in a just cause. They led the last attack on Antichrist. Their comrades' blood has bought a new right to breed an honorable race. They have challenged death and dared him face to face. We're none of us the same, the boys reply. For George lost both his legs and Bill's stone blind. Poor Jim shot through the lungs and like to die. And Bert's gone syphilitic. You'll not find a chap who served that hasn't found some change. And the bishop said, the ways of God are strange.
Yeah.
The End and the Beginning by Wisława Szymborska, a Polish woman who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1996. The End and the Beginning. After every war, someone has to clean up. Things won't straighten themselves up, after all. Someone has to push the rubble to the side of the road so the corpse-filled wagons can pass. Someone has to get mired in scum and ashes, sofa springs, splintered glass, and bloody rags. Someone has to drag in a girder to prop up a wall. Someone has to glaze a window, rehang a door. Photogenic, it's not, and it takes years. All the cameras have left for another war. We'll need the bridges back and new railway stations. Sleeves will go ragged from rolling them up. Someone, broom in hand, still recalls the way it was. Someone else listens and nods with unsevered head. But already there are those nearby starting to mill about who will find it dull. From out of the bushes, sometimes someone still unearths rusted out arguments and carries them to the garbage pile. Those who knew what was going on here must make way for those who know little and less than little, and finally, as little as nothing. In the grass that has overgrown causes and effects, someone must be stretched out, blade of grass in his mouth, gazing at the clouds.
Napoleon's Army, After the Fall of Moscow, by Victor Hugo. Snow, in what was left of the city behind them, drifted into the smoke and flames. In their retreat, the army did not know one white field from another, or the left flank from the right or center. Ensigns whited out, the voices of commanders lost. What had been an army was now a herd. More snow. Mercury falling. Some of the wounded tried to shelter themselves in the bellies of dead horses. The bugler, frozen to death at his post, stood upright, lips gone white with rime, the brass of the trumpet locked in the solid ice of his hand. Flurries of rifle fire blended with shrapnel and snowflakes. The grenadier, surprised to find himself now trembling, marched with a more thoughtful step, snot frozen in his mustache. It snowed more still. The wind out of the Arctic sizzled through strange country, slippery with pink ice. The barefoot soldiers walked on without bread. These were not quite living men, these wanderers in that fog. They were a dream, a mystery, a procession of shadows over a black sky. Solitude settled into the mind of each, like vengeance quietly gathering out of the dreadful vastness. The sky made turbid snow over the largest army ever, an immeasurable shroud. Each of the soldiers fell alone, struck by raiding troops or by the deadlier North. They jumped the cannon to burn the carriage. Whoever slept for a moment died. The wasteland swallowed them whole, regiments at a time, visible now where they lay down to rest as undulations in an anonymous snow. Fugitives, wounded men and dying, in caissons, stretchers, and sleds, overloading the bridges, falling asleep by the 10,000, woke up hundreds or less. A duke who, weeks ago, commanded obedience from battalions, pleaded with 3 Cossacks now to accept his gold watch in exchange for bread. Night after night, on the alert for attack, dying soldiers took their rifles and saw shadow squadrons from overhead, like vultures flung down, screaming out of the whirlwind. Armies died in a single night. The emperor, before he fled, stood by and watched, and felt, as in the core of a great oak, the clock of an inevitable axe.
November 19th, 9 days from now, marks the 150th anniversary of what? The Gettysburg Address. Abraham Lincoln, of course. 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
I stand among the graves by Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin. I stand among the graves and mourn. I look about and think of ends. The sacred ashes lie forlorn, and all around the field extends. A country lane lies near at hand, and now and then I hear the sound of wagon wheels against the sand as they go past the hallowed ground. Bare fields are all the eye can see. No brook, no hill, no lonely tree. Among the graves and silent stones, a few scant bushes dot the land, and wooden crosses, row on row, monotonous and mournful, stand.
An open circle to stand and introduce themselves. But today, we expected too many people here for the first time because of the nature of the program. And so we'd like to ask you to please stand as a group if you're new. And let us welcome all of you. So if anybody's new, please stand and let us give you a special welcome. Here's somebody. Yay. And welcome back so many snowbirds and people who have recently arrived after being away a bit. And now we're going to pass the baskets. Your donations are used to pay for rent to LCS and for the services of the women and men who make the refreshments, put out the chairs, and watch our cars each week. We'd also like to ask that you dig a little deeper for your donation this morning in anticipation of two significant added expenses in December. On December 8th, Don Aiken will return to give his annual PowerPoint update on the energy outlook, lakeside, in Mexico, and in the world. On December 22nd, renowned art historian Manuel Aguilar, who's been with us the previous 2 Decembers, will present a lecture entitled Frida Kahlo, Brush of Anguish. Both of these important and popular events require a room equipped to project slides on a screen. So for these 2 presentations, we'll have to be renting a room at Hotel Real de Chapala. Next week's Open Circle will feature Doug Buettner who will talk about life-changing moments and their impact on the development of what is called the higher self. Now, as you know, today's program is special. We will not have the usual meditation because the entire program is a kind of meditation. Also, in order to preserve the spirit of the observance, we will not have our customary conclusion. I promise you that you'll recognize the conclusion when you hear it. At that time, please stack your chairs as usual and correctly dispose of your coffee cups. And then you may leave quietly. Following today's program, if you would like to join us to continue this discussion afterwards, we will have, many of us, lunch at the Peacock Garden. I think that's its name. Okay, and we invite all of you to come and continue the discussion. Now I would like to turn the program over to David Bryan.
The presentation today is a Universal Remembrance Day, observing and honoring the veterans, all veterans, whatever their country of origin is. It's easy to judge the architects of war, the inhumanity of war, and the horror war imposes on the world. However, the energy of our judging keeps our focus out there, on them, external to us. In fact, it is the process of judging that protects us from experiencing the complexity of our own feelings. It's much more difficult to do today what we're asking of you today. We're asking you to walk inside the feelings of the soldiers who served, to feel what they felt, see what they saw, and understand what they thought. All the readings today that were selected by three of Lakeside's wordsmiths were either written by soldiers themselves, some who died in battle, or those who observed firsthand the travesty of war. They will take you inside the humanity of the soldiers who put their lives on the line. The universal language in every human being is to be seen at the point of their reality. We ask you today to see them in their reality. This morning we are honoring veterans from every country. So first, if you are a veteran who served in any military, in any country, please stand and let us acknowledge your service and sacrifice. This is your day.